Yes, wonderful. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Good morning. It is my distinct pleasure to introduce one of the kindest souls that I have had the opportunity to engage with at OSU Extension, Brian Raisin. So, Brian understands Extension extensively. He understands both the rural as well as urban environments, and he has done extraordinary work to help us as a collective move forward. He serves as the associate professor as well as extension field specialist for community and organizational leadership. But most importantly, he is a gift. He is a gift to us, he's a gift to the world, and it is my indeed pleasure to introduce him as a speaker today for our summit.
Thanks. Thank you. Now I'm good. I need a moment. You almost made me cry. Oh, you were so kind. I'm so glad.
It's all true.
Your smile. I love this work. I love you guys. I mean, we are lucky. We're blessed to be able to hang out and do this kind of work. So, all right, get it together here, Brian. Okay, so where to start? Where to start? I don't even know. Let's just jump in. Here's Cunyan Bui, a young man from Vietnam. I saw this story about a year or so ago, and his quote just struck me. He was doing a story from the stage. If you've ever seen that, if you haven't, go watch it tonight. Google it. You can watch it on your computers. Cast it to your TV. It looks better on a big screen. But in the interview before he told his story, he said something that absolutely struck me, so much so that I went back and looked it up and grabbed the picture because I wanted to share it. It absolutely blew me away. Good storytelling must come from listening. But listening is very powerful and risky endeavor because, and here's the kicker, when we truly listen, we risk changing ourselves, and that's scary. Are you willing to risk changing yourself? Are you willing to truly listen and give that a try? We're talking about storytelling, but I'm starting with listening. Let's take just a second and unmute or share in the chat box. Just process this for a second. Think first and then type or unmute. What might happen personally to us if we endeavor to pause and truly listen before we start teaching or talking or whatever it is we're doing? Anybody have a thought on that they'd like to share? We're educated, we're trained to go tell, to teach. But what if we pause? Jackie, I see you unmuted there.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think we take the risk of hearing that what it is that they want or need with and from us is different than what we either are prepared for or thought we wanted to contribute.
Thank you, Jackie. And in the chat box, we may learn something about ourselves. We become vulnerable. We might change our perspective. We have to admit that we don't know. Oh my gosh. I share that I don't know a lot of things with my graduate students when I'm teaching in our ACEL sister department. And I think it makes me maybe a little more human because I want to learn with them. It's a partnership, and that's how I view learning, kind of a co-construction of knowledge. Yeah, I can share some things that I know, but the context of that. So think Malcolm Mills' adult learning theory and how we need that context. We want to see it applied. We want to see the intersections of theory and practice. Anyway, okay, I'm going to get off topic here. Let's go back. Thank you for sharing. Those were beautiful. Absolutely. So storytelling to connect with a diverse urban audience. So let's just jump in. Two kind of objectives or two questions that I based today's talk on. How can we use storytelling to better connect with our urban audiences, the ones that we know that are current and those potential future audiences? And then are we willing to personally risk being changed, truly putting ourselves out there in order to have that potential impact that maybe we've never before seen? Bottom line, and I saw some of these, thank you, you confirmed what I think is true, what I read about teaching and storytelling. Are we willing to become vulnerable and transparent and humble, intellectual humility? We're educators, we work for the Ohio State, who cares? It's the partnerships that matter. It's coming to know our audience. Are we willing to put others first? Can we make listening, can we become other-centric so that in listening we can connect? And I just said that we're educators, we're supposed to tell, not listen, but what if we started with listening? Are we willing to recognize other ways of knowing? So I'm throwing epistemology in here and our ontological approach to life. But these are questions that we need to wrestle with before we're standing in front of those urban audiences. I contend that authentic and transparent storytelling can change the world. It's the stories that connect us and give us the context, the connection, the personal part. And so even if some of you are not touchy-feely types, maybe your engineer brain, I'm in a family of those, and my partner is an engineer. When I've worked with those groups, and I've worked with quite a few in other colleges at Ohio State College of Engineering, when I ask them to think about, say we're doing strategic planning in terms of stories about their students, about their personal lives, the room changes, even if you're that analytical thinker. So my apologies to the non-warm and fuzzy people, but this works at all levels, with all genres. So imagine that you have an idea for starting an urban farm to provide jobs and feed some low resource residents in a neighborhood, maybe just 3 miles south of campus. Oh yeah, some of you know this. This is Franklinton Farms. And somebody did have that idea. They did imagine in an urban area to move in and do something that could be really positive. Let me get my clicker to work again here. There we go. The question is this: do you go in with your program? We're here to fix things. Is that our traditional approach? I'm from the government and I'm here to help. That was a joke. I used to hear that back when I was growing up. My grandparents would joke about it. That's not the best approach. Or do we take time to listen, to get the stories of the people who live there, and then determine, co-construct what's needed? It's a very different approach. So these are my grandparents. This is Mingo County, West Virginia, about 1950. And my grandmother there made most of their clothing. She prepared their food safely. She knew how to preserve their food. She had such great knowledge and ability. But interestingly, she also brilliantly encouraged her grandchildren, that would be me and my brothers and sisters, to go to college, even though she only had a 6th grade education. It's a fascinating thing. I don't know where that came from. I never learned where that came from. My grandfather as well. The little girl with the smile is my mom, and that's her brother, my uncle, Max. And they had pretty good lives. Mom never went to college, but she did take a few classes and learn to be a lab technician and literally help save lives. Today, I know she's at home in home hospice care with dementia and Alzheimer's. But she still gives us joy with a smile, and especially when I play some Johnny Cash songs, some of the old hymns and things like that. But here's the point: our urban audiences are filled with people who have stories that we cannot fathom. I want to say that again in big words. They are filled. The only way to make a lasting difference, I believe, in their lives, in our extension work, is if we first learn their stories, build that trust, be vulnerable and transparent ourselves, and co-create solutions. I think that is the answer, and that requires listening. So, stories. Let me throw a few things at you from Story Center. Story Center. Traditional stories. I'm just going to do this really quickly. You can look at the notes later because I want to move through and get to some conversation. Just checking the time. So traditional stories. We create narratives. We know this. Sense-making, morals. Think about Aesop's fables and things like that. Then we have pedagogy, andragogy, adult and youth learning. Try to weave concepts together and help people understand subject material. We want to engage, but not necessarily with a value system that we might do with creating some traditional stories or narratives. Stories give us a place to begin inquiry. I really like that idea. This is how we can start, or I think we need to start our extension work instead of thinking, oh, I've got a program. I had this idea last night. Stories can be illustrative. I love that. They give context. They provide perspective. They make the abstract concrete. And I just mentioned this a moment ago, Malcolm Knowles, adult learning theory, andragogy, instead of pedagogy. So it's a shift. And this is what we do in extension really well. They can move us to action, which I love because I always want to do things. You know, I want to jump in. Why stories have personal growth and reflection. And again, just really quickly, it can help us stop. The note here is that, or the idea that people don't listen as much anymore. And sometimes we have to pay people to listen, our counselors and things like that. What if we became counselors for each other? What if we listened so that we can have reflection and growth? I assign my graduate students all the time reflection papers to help cement that learning, to move what we're talking about up in their brains. Think about Bloom's taxonomy of just taking the information, turning it into knowledge, and then the context, and then using that as and we do this all the time. Education awareness, bringing things to life, the personal stories, the joke there. I've had colleagues say, oh yeah, I get the best ratings on my classes when I have a guest speaker. Well, why is that? Because that guest speaker usually comes in with a different perspective, some other context, and tells a story about their work that then relates back to the theory or whatever is being taught in the class. Movement building, again, making connections. Stories can be so powerful in this, and bringing people together, making those connections to start a movement or advocacy or something like policy advocacy, expressing opinions and needs. Public policy doesn't just happen, it needs to be informed. The note at the bottom, I throw those in there so I don't forget, because I have 1,000 stories that I want to share with you guys. But a colleague, this is just maybe less than a year ago, had a grant for $1 million to improve safety services in their city. It is in Ohio, I won't say where. Short-sighted, I'm just going to call them out. City council said, nah, we don't think we have matching funds or budget projections. Well, their budget projections were 3 times what they said when they turned down the grant. And now they're in crisis because what they were relying on has been dropping off the private sector. And my colleague said, why didn't I bring all those handwritten notes to the policy meeting to share the stories of people who have written in thanking that group for their safety services? Research and evaluation, we can assess and document. Of course, we have to do this. If Jackie's still on the call, she's going to love me right now, because yes, we have to document, we have to tell our story, so USDA and others will fund us. Folks in Columbus thought things were great, but the existing program didn't quite reach the entire segment of our population. We didn't assess it well. The numbers showed good reach, but there was still disconnect. So we use stories, we use them for evaluation. So every program has lots of stories to tell. Yeah, just if you think it's a mundane program, you're not looking deep. You're not looking below the surface there. Really quickly, people see, hear, and perceive the world in different ways. So an origin story is a kind of a fun way. I'll just throw this at you really quick, and we're going to wrap. So jot down. So think of a program. Think about why. What's the purpose for that program? Think Simon Sinek, start with why instead of what we're going to do. Think about why you're doing it, and then let that determine what you do in your program. So a couple of bullets here. You can do it right now if you want. How did the program begin? And then link those two things together, and you've kind of got the origin story of how it started. The key question for program evaluation, of course, is what was the result? But we need to start with the origin and then see if we're indeed measuring that result. So think logic model, think working backward. There's 100 ways to think about this. But here's the secret part. I found this very fascinating. This is from the Story Center as well. The most important stories aren't the ones that we tell about ourselves or our program or product or service. The most important are the ones going on inside the heads of our audiences, our funders, the ones they're telling themselves that affect how they view the world, how they view our organization as a partner or as somebody coming into their community. They form the image of who they want to be, what they want to support, and the decisions that they make. And so taking the time back to my listening where I started, it's absolutely critical that we do that. So the question, how do we reach them? How do we capture their attention? How do we help move folks to action? Show them good data, because that's important, the evaluation piece, that things are working, but tell good stories and then listen to theirs. I need to add that, listen to theirs. Really quickly, why storytelling, personal growth and reflection. And again, you'll see these in the handouts. And I did an expanded handout, I think 3 pages with more from the Story Center on there that you'll get. Education, awareness, trying to affect change, movement building, policy advocacy, research, and evaluation. So this is one of my favorite pictures of Susanlbert. Susan's just retiring, and it makes me sad because I love her. She's amazing. Where is she standing, and what is she doing? We were on an urban garden tour a few years ago. You see a couple of people you recognize in there. I was standing back here taking the picture. Susan's listening. She has extraordinary leadership and care. And she also has always been open to risk being changed. I've learned so much from her, from just watching her and how she works, how she did her work for so many years here with Extension. We're impoverished at her retirement, but we know she's got love and she's doing other things. So bless her, we're glad that we could have learned. But that's an example, I think, that really stands out in my mind about why we need to listen and understand before we go in and start doing our work. I've got a homework assignment for you. You have to do this. This is so compelling. Crystal Williams, it's a Stories from the Stage. You can just Google Crystal Williams Potential Matters and you'll find it. It's a quick video, maybe 5 or 6 minutes. But she tells a story about honoring potential, about looking for potential in people, about believing in people maybe before they believe in themselves. And to me, it's the epitome of our extension work. This will capture your attention. Amazing woman and her story. It's just, you've got to watch it. So Google that up, Crystal Williams, Potential Matter. The lesson here is that we have to listen so we can hear the stories, see the potential, and then act, ultimately to make our world a better place. Or maybe it's just to make that one person have a better environment, life, day.